think that we're watching the ROI. I think that would be a way, you know, that NetSuite is a significant investment. And so it promises a lot of return on investment, but I think we're still watching to see what that really turns into. And all these pieces you're talking about are potential threats if they're not aligned to gain that return on that investment.
Absolutely. And NetSuite was designed as a financial system, and then somewhere along the line they decided to add CRM to it, and that's always a recipe for confusion.
And yeah, adding CRM and kind of building it as you go. Would you agree with
Yep.
that? It wasn't sure.
Yep. Yep.
Well, it is getting, so we are now launching the dashboard. So remember how long we talked about needing dashboards, where it's able to spit out, okay, what is our donor activity, you know, and what strata.
We had to rebuild that or build that ourselves.
Well, so
At one point, it's going to go virtuous.
they are talking about virtuous, and I'm not at the table in all those conversations anymore. But you know, the third party players are there's virtuous, and then Meridian is now a customizing shop, sports shop.
So those dashboard features are built into the system. What you have to do is configure them.
And that's where yet another third party comes in, Meridian, that is now helping us really get those on board. So, you know, in economies of scale, you know, your budget would melt immediately to even think about NetSuite, if I'm being honest. But, you know, virtuous may help them for the best cost, dollar cost.
So to go over to Virtuous, that's a system that's designed specifically for CRM. So they've got the CRM capabilities designed into it, built into it, architected, and all that. They do have a financial component, but their financial component doesn't compare at all to what's in NetSuite. So there are different strengths and weaknesses in both of those.
There's got to be probably some back-end help.
Yep. And that's where you get into exporting out into Excel, and then you can reconfigure your data in Excel and import it into the other system.
But ultimately, that's what BlackRock had. They had a financial aid, you know, operations for financial, and they had the tech, which was development. And those two talk to each other, and then no one else to talk to anybody about that, manage all that. So NetSuite, in conjunction with something else, there needs to be something, but that's where you guys have do the translation. How to make all of these work together. Because if they work against each other, or they don't work at all,
Right.
then no one's ahead.
I'm fond of saying, I used to work with my brother who was in computer sales, and I'm fond of saying that I always used to make his statements work. and because he would sell a financial system, and I would have to configure it or tweak it to do other things that were non-financial but tied into the financials. And the same thing we found out with NetSuite. We had to do a significant lift on the data migration because there was no one-to-one relationship between the legacy system and the new system. So there had to be a significant engineering effort to get that data over there.
I call it a translator. And the translators will talk, so that they can talk to each other and move like they're supposed to.
Yeah.
You guys had painstakingly decode what we weren't being given in terms of a clean path of how to exit the data
Right.
out of the legacy system.
Right. We deconstructed the data out of Razor's Edge and had to reconstruct it, remap it, and architect it, to use your term, into NetSuite, and that was a challenge. There were 1 million donations over a 20-year period. So extrapolate that to the number of donors and the bad data we had to clean up, and it was an exercise.
And all while keeping information to the donor correct. While all
Yeah.
this is happening, because if it's not correct, the donor, for some reason, they get upset. And then they don't give to you anymore. So you don't want to upset the apple cart while you're trying to get this whole thing fixed, so they can live better and happier.
Right.
So it's a monumental task.
So let me go over to Virtuous. You guys moved from Denari to Virtuous. The data migration was not as significant because the export capability out of Denari and the import capability into Virtuous was a lot cleaner. And so it was easier, in my respect, to pull the data out of one and push it into the other. And we had very few problems in that process.
You can certainly speak to that, Rob, because of your work with John. And so you could tell firsthand that this is going to be a much cleaner pass-through than maybe what you experienced in previous migrations.
Mhm.
Whereas on our end of the spectrum, this is the first time that we've splashed into the school. We had been with Denari for 25 years, right, wrong, or different, so we had never been through a migration before.
Mhm.
So, and again, I mean, Rob was really driving the boat because there were so many of these things that he straight does.
And there were a few leaks. A few leaks.
But initially, Paul, his CEO, was going to do it all. And they can't do that. You know, as the CEO, he didn't have the expertise to even understand what had to happen. And that's what Rachel Lab and how they can help that out.
In moving data from an old system, old legacy system, 25 years, 20 years, to a new state-of-the-art system, there never is a one-to-one relationship in the data. You have the same data elements, donors, contact information, gifts that they've given over that period of time, but there's rarely a one-to-one relationship so that you can just pick it up from one and move it to the other. There's a certain amount of mapping that has to be done and reconfiguring of the data. So what I've found in talking to vendors is that they have a tendency to look at, with blinders on, look at just what they deal with, and they don't pay attention to the notes. Where are the notes? Well, we didn't think about notes. Well, the notes go back 20 years. We want to capture those notes and bring them forward. And that requires a certain amount of engineering work to bring those notes forward with the right records. And so it requires a certain amount of digging and mining of the data behind the scenes with a data engineer so that you can understand clearly where that data is and how it ties together in the legacy system before you piece it together in the new system. And that's the challenge. So, and that's what we ran into in your case as well.
Rob, from your experience, I mean, what would a traditional migration look like in terms of when the legacy switch gets turned off and the new team switch goes live? I mean, what have you experienced? Do you get a normal handoff of the baton so that, I mean, because we're really talking about taking the safety net, if you will, out from underneath of our feet and really jumping off the cliff and trusting that we've got, to your point, we've got accurate data, because even
Right.
to Dennis's point, if we can't trust the system to know that we're acknowledging a donor's gift from a factual standpoint, whether it's a gift in May or funds were leaked out in the end of the year, the year-end gift,
So there is no normal, to answer your question directly. It's a process that you have to go through, and anytime you're going through a new process, there's a learning component to that, and there's a certain amount of creativity that has to be done in order to that your widgets over here match up with your widgets over here. And so it requires some labor, somebody to pull back the covers and look at that data, do the analytics and the data mining to figure out how those notes are tied to the donor. We found that it wasn't that straightforward in Denari. We found it wasn't that straightforward in Razor's Edge.
Actually, next week, we first started talking to next week. Oh, yeah, we've got razors as experts. We've got
Yes.
razors as people. We've done this before. And then we got into it, and no one knew anything about data in Razor's Edge to the degree we needed.
Yeah.
And that was, then what do we do?
So it does take a certain amount of digging and making some base assessments about what your data looks like and basically how it's tied together. And with Razor's Edge, it's literally walking into a dark cave with a little tiny light and trying to figure it out. And it was achievable, and we got there, but it took us months to get there. And in your case, it was a lot shorter because the primary data that we migrated out off of Denari into Virtuous matched up pretty well, and the engineer I was working with had a good understanding of that. But when I came back to him to ask him about things like notes, he didn't know where to find it. And so we had to dig together to piece those things together.
And I would virtually say that every mission is going to go through some data conversion at some point. Because every year, somebody's coming out with a faster, smarter, and now with AI as a piece of this whole equation, AI is a new piece of mission work, but it's going to be able to identify things that they never identified before. Once that happens, there's going to be, all the vendors are going to promise that they can do it. But they can do it with brainstorm lab people in the middle to do the translation so they can talk to each other. So I don't believe that most of these vendors have no idea how to do that translation.
So, right, because they're trained, our success coach at Virtuous was trained to a certain level. We copy data to map into our format. But what they don't dig down into is you have additional data in your legacy system that doesn't map to their format. So we have to make use of customized fields. And that's what Dennis is alluding to. That's where we come in and figure out what that match is and then bring the data over and fit it in. So I was able to work with the Virtuous people very well in that regard because I went through the experience with Razor's Edge and NetSuite and understood that. So it's easier now for me to shine that light on where your data is in the legacy system and then figure out how to draw those maps. And it is a process. It is if we went to Sunday breakfast and did a migration for you guys, I'd have to go through the same exercise to build that process and map that data into the new system. It's the way it is. It's not something that we created or necessarily that we're promoting. It's the way the industry has developed. What did you say you guys use? Boomerang.
If you said the name, I'd recognize it, but it was already done by the time I got there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I know our one staff member was running both systems at the same time. He said we got to process determinations, so he was making sure that things were lining up.
Yep.
Just on after the conversion.
Yep.
And then the original system, the subscription ended, so that disappeared. Yeah, he was kind of keeping an eye on.
So we tried to do a parallel run where we're running the old system and the new system together or simultaneously. Prior to that, I'm going back to your original question. Prior to that, it's incumbent on the customer, the donor development department, to do a certain amount of testing and validating of the data to make sure that what we migrate and test over to the new system actually does show up correctly in the right places. And we hit the right widget fields. And the exercise that you're talking about takes that a step further, validating after the fact and making sure that what you're posting in the old system and posting in the new system gives you the same results.
Yeah, and he was the only one that was doing that.
Yeah, and that's,
Looked at both of them.
yeah, and that's one of the things that I speak about in here is that you have to have the right skill levels. You have to have the right amount of resources to be able to do all of that so that you get the results you're looking for and you're satisfied with the outcome. The vendor can come in and do a piece of that whole project, but there's another piece on top of that that's a responsibility of the mission to make sure that the data is accurate and it accomplishes what you want it to do. So it's got to be a handshake between the mission and us and the vendor that's doing the migration for the system you're going to. It's a complicated process, and even though the basic steps of the process from old to new are the same from one organization to the other, and the data is pretty much the same, the features of the systems are different and the architectures are different. So there's got to be a certain amount of customization that takes place throughout that process to make it work. So, and that all speaks to what ultimately becomes the enhanced customer experience, because you want your customer, your donor, to have accurate data. You want to be able to give them a letter that says your year-to-date donation is accurate. If you have self-service capabilities online, you want that donor to be able to have a good experience going online and entering their credit card or however they're paying and make sure that dollar amount accurately gets into the database to reflect what they did. So these are all components that you need to pay attention to and think about. And as I said, the strategies are the same. It's the pieces that you have to put together that are different between them. Constraints. Budget is the big constraint, right? And then availability of skilled personnel. So you got to make sure that you've got the right people working on this so that those individuals are doing the work on the mission side. They're also looking at the data and validating that the data is accurate. And we face this every place we go. And it takes a little bit of training and reorientation, but everybody can get there sooner or later. External support. We represent external support in Brainstorm Labs. So we would be an organization that you could bring in to help make that process work and piece those components together. And then on the large mission side, go out to the cloud and use cloud-based data management systems. That's where you get into your big data, your massive data sets, and that's where you need people with expertise in data engineering and data management at the IT level to manage that for you. Again, the end result is to get the data outcomes that you anticipated at the beginning. Just another way to look at this, these are different components that you need to use to leverage your data. Donor data integration with external systems, with self-service system, advanced donor segmentation. I'm not even going to try to speak to that. That's his bailiwick. Predictive analytics. If you have clean data, if you have accurate data, and it's timely, you have a better chance to predict how your donor database is going to behave, and you have based on a campaign that you want to run. You'll have better information in the system. You can analyze that and come up with some predictive analytics on how you can use that data.